I'm Olivia Bennett. I'm 29 years old, and for most of my life, I thought financial independence meant freedom. Turns out, in my family, it just made me a target. When I was 23, fresh out of college and drowning in student loans, my father started sending me monthly deposits. For $1,000. Every single month. No strings attached, he said. Just help while you get on your feet. I thought it was love. I thought it was support. I was wrong. It was an investment. And 6 years later, when my parents called me in a panic demanding I come home immediately, I finally learned what they expected in return. What they wanted wasn't help. It wasn't a favor. They wanted my entire life savings, my career, my future, all handed over to fix a mess that was never mine to clean up. And when I said no, they didn't just ask again. They tried to destroy me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Tempe, Arizona, I always knew where I stood in the Bennett family hierarchy. I was second. Natalie, my older sister by 3 years, was the sun around which everything revolved. She was captain of the cheer squad in high school, homecoming queen, the girl who could do no wrong. She married Brandon right after college, a guy our parents adored, someone from a good family with a steady job in real estate. By the time she was 26, she had 2 kids, Tyler and Chloe, and a beautiful house in one of the nicer parts of Mesa. She threw birthday parties that looked like Pinterest boards come to life. She volunteered at the kids' school. She made our mother cry happy tears at least once a month. And me? I moved to Scottsdale right after graduation, took a job at a marketing firm downtown, and focused on building something that was mine. I lived in a modest 1-bedroom apartment, drove a used Honda, and spent my weekends working on campaigns and learning everything I could about digital strategy. I didn't get married young. I didn't have kids. I didn't fit the mold my parents had sketched out for their daughters. My mother, Karen, would call every few weeks with the same questions. Are you seeing anyone seriously? Don't you want children before it's too late? Natalie's kids are growing up so fast. Wouldn't it be nice if they had cousins? My father, Richard, was quieter about it, but his silence said enough. He'd ask about work, nod politely, then spend the rest of dinner talking about Natalie's latest accomplishment or Tyler's soccer game. I told myself it didn't bother me. I told myself I didn't need their approval. But deep down, in the places I didn't like to look, I wondered if maybe I'd taken the wrong path. If maybe being the responsible, independent one just meant being the lonely one. Still, I kept going. I paid off my student loans in 4 years. I maxed out my retirement contributions. I saved aggressively, lived below my means, and built a financial cushion I was proud of. And through it all, every single month my father sent me $4,000. It started the summer after I graduated. I'd been job hunting for 2 months, waiting tables at night to cover rent, when the first deposit hit my account. I called him immediately. Dad, I think there's been a mistake. Someone put $4,000 in my account. That was me, he said. His voice was warm, steady. You're just starting out. I don't want you to struggle the way I did. It's not charity, Olivia. It's family. I tried to refuse. Dad, I can manage. I've got the waitressing job and I have an interview next week. Take it, he insisted. You've worked hard. You deserve a little help while you find your footing. When you're stable, you can stop accepting it. But for now, let me do this. So I accepted. And the next month, another $4,000 came. Then another. By the time I landed my job at the marketing firm, the deposits had become routine. I brought it up once over dinner. Dad, I'm making good money now. You don't need to keep sending the allowance. He waved me off. You're doing great, but Phoenix is expensive. Keep saving. Build your future. Your mother and I are fine. We want to help. So I kept accepting. I used some of it for rent, some for my loan payments, and the rest I saved. Over 6 years, those deposits became part of my foundation. I didn't blow the money on vacations or designer clothes. I invested it. I built an emergency fund. I started a brokerage account. I became the kind of financially secure person I'd always wanted to be. I thought my parents were proud. I thought the money was their way of showing they believed in me, even if they didn't say it out loud. I thought wrong. Natalie's perfect life started to crack about 2 years ago. It began with small things. Brandon started working late more often. Natalie stopped posting family photos on social media. The birthday parties got smaller, quieter. Then one night she called me sobbing. He's been cheating, she said. For over a year. I found messages, Olivia. So many messages. I don't know what to do. I drove to her house that night. Sat with her while she cried. Held her hand while she called a divorce attorney the next morning. I told her she was strong, that she'd get through this, that the kids would be okay. And she did file. But Brandon didn't go quietly. He fought for custody, delayed court dates, hid assets. When the divorce finally went through, Natalie got the kids, but barely any support. Brandon moved to California shortly after, sent a few child support payments, then stopped. No forwarding address. No explanation. Just gone. Natalie couldn't afford the house anymore. She moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a rough part of Mesa where the walls were thin and the parking lot had broken lights. She took a part-time job at a dental office because full-time childcare was impossible to afford. My parents helped where they could, but their retirement savings were modest, and my father's pension only stretched so far. I helped too. I paid for Tyler's after-school program when Natalie couldn't swing it. I bought school supplies and clothes when the seasons changed. I sent grocery money without her asking. I took the kids on weekends so she could breathe, could sleep, could remember who she was before everything fell apart. I never resented it. Natalie was my sister. Tyler and Chloe were my niece and nephew. Family helps family. That's what I believed. But I also believed there were limits. I believed help was something you gave freely, not something that was owed. I was about to learn my family didn't see it that way. The call came on a Tuesday in late September. I was at work, sitting in a strategy meeting, when my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced down. Mom. Then it buzzed again. Dad. I ignored it the first time. They knew I was working. But then my phone rang a third time, and the meeting leader paused mid-sentence. You need to get that? She asked. I nodded, stepped into the hallway. Mom. Olivia, thank God. Her voice was frantic, shaking. You need to come home right now. What's wrong? Is someone hurt? No, nothing like that. But we need you here. It's urgent. We're all waiting. All? Who's all? Your father, me, Natalie. We have something very important to discuss. I can't wait. My stomach twisted. The tone was wrong. Too urgent for something trivial, too vague for something serious. Mom, I'm at work. Can this wait until tonight? No, she snapped. It can't. If you care about this family at all, you'll come now. I told my boss I had a family emergency and left. The drive from downtown Phoenix to my parents' house in Tempe took 30 minutes, but it felt longer. My mind raced through possibilities. Someone was sick. There was a financial crisis. Something had happened to one of the kids. I parked in the driveway beside Natalie's beat-up Corolla and walked inside. They were all in the living room. My father in his usual recliner, my mother perched on the edge of the couch, Natalie beside her looking pale and exhausted. On the coffee table sat a stack of papers, glossy brochures, and a laptop open to a real estate website. "Okay, I'm here," I said. "What's going on?" My mother smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We have incredible news. Sit down." I stayed standing. "Just tell me." "Your father and I have been working on something for Natalie," she began. "Something that will finally give her and the kids the stability they deserve." I glanced at Natalie, who wouldn't meet my gaze. "We found a house," my father said. His voice was calm, measured, like he was explaining a business deal. "A beautiful place in Gilbert. 4 bedrooms, big backyard, good school." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It's perfect for Natalie and the kids. "That's great," I said slowly. "Did you get approved for a loan?" "Not exactly," my mother said. "The down payment is substantial. And with Natalie's income and credit situation, she can't qualify on her own. So we've decided to help." I waited. My father cleared his throat. "We're using most of our savings for the down payment. But the monthly mortgage is more than Natalie can handle right now. That's where you come in." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You've been receiving an allowance from us for 6 years," he said. "For $1,000 a month. That's $288,000 total. We kept careful records." My chest tightened. "Okay, so we're calling in that support," my mother said gently. We need you to take over Natalie's mortgage payments. It's $2,900 a month. You can easily afford it. And it's far less than what we've given you. The room tilted. You want me to pay Natalie's mortgage? It's not want, Olivia, my father said. It's fair. We invested in your future. Now we're asking you to invest in hers. But I didn't ask for that money, I said. You offered. You told me it was help, no strings attached. And it was, my mother insisted. But family takes care of family. Natalie is struggling. You're not. We raised you better than this. I looked at Natalie. Did you know about this? She hesitated. They brought it up last week. I told them I didn't know if you'd agree, but they said you would. Does you love us? My hands were shaking. I used that money to pay off debt, to save, to build a future. I didn't blow it. I was responsible. Exactly, my father said. So you're in a position to help now. I stared at the papers on the table. The mortgage documents. The house listing. They'd already bought it. They'd signed contracts, made plans, built a life for Natalie on the assumption I'd pay for it. You bought a house, I said slowly, without asking me first. We knew you'd say yes, my mother said. You're not married. You don't have children. You have the income. What else would you spend it on? I felt something crack inside me. That money wasn't a loan. It was a gift. You can't just demand it back. We're not demanding, my father said, his voice hardening. We're asking. As your parents. As the people who raised you, who gave you everything. This is how you repay that. I thought about the 6 years of deposits. How they'd framed it as love, as support. How I trusted them. How stupid I'd been. I'm not doing this, I said. Excuse me? My mother stood. You're refusing to help your sister? I've already helped, I said. I've paid for Tyler's programs. I've bought clothes and groceries. I've given time and money and everything I could. But I'm not paying for a house I didn't agree to. Natalie's eyes filled with tears. So you're just going to let us struggle? She whispered. You're going to live in your nice apartment in Scottsdale, while my kids share a bedroom in a place that isn't safe? That's not fair, I said. You can't guilt me into this. This is manipulation. You're being selfish, my mother hissed. We gave you nearly $300,000. $300,000. And you won't give back a fraction of that to help your own sister? That money was a gift, I repeated. I don't owe you anything. My father stood, his face red. If you walk out that door without agreeing to this, you're no longer part of this family. Do you understand me? You'll be choosing money over blood. I looked at each of them. My father rigid and furious. My mother desperate and accusing. Natalie crying into her hands. And I realized they'd never seen me as a person. Just a resource. Then I guess I'm choosing money, I said. And I walked out. The calls started that night. First my mother, leaving voicemails that ranged from pleading to venomous. Then Natalie, sobbing about how I'd abandoned her. Then my father, cold and clipped, informing me I was no longer welcome at family gatherings. I blocked their numbers. I thought that would be the end. But the next morning my phone exploded. Texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. My Aunt Denise called me heartless. My Uncle Greg said I was a disgrace. My cousin Brittany sent a long message about how family means sacrifice, and I was spitting on everything our grandparents had built. The messages kept coming. Dozens of them. Each one certain I was wrong. Each one assuming they knew the full story. They didn't ask my side. They didn't question why my parents had bought a house without talking to me first. They just piled on one after another, like I was the villain in a play they'd already scripted. I blocked them all. Every single one. And that night, sitting alone in my apartment with my phone finally silent, I cried for the first time. Not because I regretted my decision, but because I'd lost my family. And I hadn't even seen it coming. The silence lasted exactly 9 days. 9 days where I went to work, came home, ordered takeout, and pretended I was fine. 9 days where I didn't cry, didn't call anyone. Didn't let myself think too hard about what I'd lost. I told myself I was strong. Independent. That I'd made the right choice and that was enough. On the 10th day, my best friend Vanessa showed up at my apartment with Thai food and wine. I didn't invite her in. I didn't have to. She took one look at my face and pushed past me into the living room. You look like hell, she said, setting the bags on my coffee table. When's the last time you ate something that wasn't cereal? I don't know, I admitted. Vanessa had been my friend since college. She was the kind of person who showed up whether you wanted her to or not, who asked hard questions and didn't accept easy answers. She was also the only person outside my family who knew about the allowance, about the complicated knot of gratitude and guilt I'd carried for years. We ate in silence for a while, then she finally spoke. So are you going to tell me what happened? Or do I have to guess? I told her everything. The phone call, the ambush at my parents' house, the mortgage they'd already committed to, the demand that I pay for it. I told her about the calls, the texts, the relatives who'd come out of nowhere to tell me I was selfish and cruel. When I finished, Vanessa was quiet for a long time. Then she refilled my wine glass and said, "Your family is insane." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "It's not funny," she continued. "They gave you money for 6 years, told you it was a gift, then retroactively decided it was a loan? That's not how gifts work. That's not how anything works." I know, I said quietly, but they don't see it that way. They see me as someone who has more than I need, so I should share. They see Natalie struggling and me comfortable, and in their minds that's not fair. Vanessa leaned forward. "Olivia, listen to me. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. They set a trap whether they meant to or not, and now they're mad you didn't walk into it. That's on them. Not you." I wanted to believe her, but part of me still wondered if maybe I should have said yes. If maybe I was being selfish, hoarding money while my nephews lived in a cramped apartment. Vanessa must have seen it on my face because she grabbed my hand. "Stop," she said firmly. "Stop doing that thing where you make yourself the villain. You've already helped Natalie. You've given thousands of dollars, your time, your energy. You don't owe anyone your entire future." I nodded, but I wasn't sure I believed it yet. The next few weeks blurred together. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office, volunteering for extra projects, anything to keep my mind occupied. My boss noticed. "You okay, Bennett?" she asked one afternoon. "You've been working like you're trying to outrun something." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just focused." She didn't look convinced. But she didn't push. At home, I started going through my finances obsessively. I pulled up every bank statement from the past 6 years, highlighted every deposit from my father, tracked where the money had gone. Student loans paid off early. Emergency fund fully stocked. Retirement accounts maxed. A brokerage account with steady growth. I'd been responsible. I'd been smart. And somehow that was being used against me. I also started documenting everything else. Every payment I'd made to Natalie or for the kids. The after-school program, $600. School clothes, $400. Groceries, at least $2,000 over the past year. Furniture when she'd moved into the apartment, $800. I hadn't kept track before because I hadn't thought I needed to. It was just helping family. But now, looking at the numbers, I realized I'd given far more than I'd ever acknowledged. Over $15,000 in the past 2 years alone. And none of it had ever been enough. One Saturday morning, I drove to my grandparents' house in Tempe. George and Helen lived in a small ranch-style home they'd owned for 40 years, the kind of place that smelled like coffee and old books. My grandmother answered the door, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Olivia, sweetheart, come in. We've been worried about you." My grandfather was in the living room reading the newspaper. He looked up, set it aside, and waved me over. "Sit," he said. "Your grandmother made coffee cake." We settled in the kitchen, and for a few minutes we just talked about normal things. Work, the weather, my grandfather's garden. Then my grandmother set down her mug and said, "Your mother called us last week." I tensed. "What did she say?" "She told us you refused to help Natalie, that you turned your back on the family." My grandfather snorted. "She made it sound like you'd committed a crime." I stared at my coffee. "Did she tell you they bought the house without asking me first? That they demanded I pay the mortgage because of the allowance Dad gave me? Your father's been sending you money?" my grandmother asked. I nodded. $4,000 a month for 6 years. He said it was to help me get started, that there were no strings attached. Now they're calling it an investment they want repaid. My grandfather leaned back in his chair, his expression hard. "That's not how Richard presented it to us. He said you've been living off them for years and refused to help when they needed you." "Of course he did," I said quietly. "They've rewritten the whole story." My grandmother reached across the table and took my hand. "Olivia, listen to me. We've known you your whole life. We know who you are. You're not selfish. You're not cruel. And if you said no to this, you had a good reason. I felt tears prick my eyes. I just couldn't do it, Grandma. They bought a house assuming I'd pay for it. They didn't ask. They didn't even consider that I might have my own plans, my own future. They just decided. That's not right, my grandfather said firmly. A gift is a gift. You can't take it back years later and call it something else. He paused. Have they tried contacting you since? I shook my head. Just the relatives. Aunt Denise, Uncle Greg, a bunch of cousins I barely know. They all think I'm the bad guy. My grandmother's mouth tightened. Denise always was dramatic. She doesn't know the whole story and she won't bother asking. She just likes being in the middle of things. My grandfather stood and walked to a drawer in the kitchen. He pulled out a checkbook and started writing. What are you doing? I asked. We're giving you something, he said. Not money. A record. He handed me the check. It was made out to me for $1. On the memo line he'd written gift. No repayment expected. I stared at it confused. Keep that, he said. Because a gift means something. It means you give without expecting return. Your parents don't understand that anymore, but we do. My grandmother nodded. And Olivia, if they keep pushing, if this gets worse, you call us. Don't handle this alone. I left their house feeling lighter than I had. In weeks. Someone believed me. Someone saw what was happening and didn't blame me for it. But the relief didn't last long. 2 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Olivia Bennett? A woman's voice asked. Yes, who's this? My name is Tracy Linton. I'm a reporter with the East Valley Tribune. I'm working on a story about family financial disputes, and your name came up. Would you be willing to comment? My blood went cold. Comment on what? I understand your parents are pursuing legal action against you for breach of familial obligation. They've alleged you received substantial financial support and are now refusing to reciprocate in their time of need. I'm looking for your side of the story. I hung up without another word. My hands were shaking. Legal action. They were suing me. Or planning to. And they'd talked to the press. I immediately called Vanessa. They're going after me, I said as soon as she picked up. They're talking to reporters. Slow down, she said. What happened? I told her about the call. There was a long pause. Okay, she said finally. You need a lawyer. Like yesterday. I don't even know where to start. I do, she said. My brother's girlfriend is an attorney. Family law. Let me make a call. Within 2 hours, I was sitting in the office of Marcus Rivera, a sharp-eyed lawyer in his early 40s who listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Do you have documentation of the deposits your father made? I do. Every single one. And documentation of the payments you made to your sister? I pulled up my phone and showed him the spreadsheet I'd made. He smiled slightly. You're organized. That's good. That's going to help. Can they actually sue me? I asked. They can try, he said. Anyone can file a lawsuit. The question is whether they have grounds. And based on what you've told me, they don't. Gifts are not loans. Unless your father explicitly stated the money was a loan, in writing with terms for repayment, he can't suddenly decide it was. But they're saying it was an investment, I said. That they supported me so I could support Natalie. Marcus shook his head. That's not a legally recognized obligation. Parents are required to support their minor children. You're an adult. You don't owe them repayment for raising you, and you certainly don't owe them support for your sibling. What if they argue I have a moral obligation? Morality isn't law, he said simply. And even if it were, you've already contributed significantly to your sister's well-being. You're not withholding help. You're refusing an unreasonable demand. He paused. Here's what I recommend. If they do file a lawsuit, we'll respond with evidence that the deposits were gifts, not loans. We'll also present your documented financial support for your sister. If they continue to harass you, we can pursue a restraining order or a cease and desist. I felt a flicker of hope. So I'm not crazy. You're not crazy, he confirmed. You're being manipulated. And we're going to make sure it stops. I left his office feeling something close to clarity. For the first time since the ambush at my parents' house, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt like I had a plan. But that night, alone in my apartment, the doubts crept back in. What if I was wrong? What if this destroyed my relationship with my family forever? What if years from now, I looked back and regretted not just giving in, not keeping the peace? I thought about Natalie's kids, about Tyler and Chloe growing up thinking their aunt didn't care. I thought about my parents growing old, bitter, convinced I'd abandoned them. And I thought about myself, about the person I'd be if I said yes. Someone who let guilt dictate her life. Someone who gave up her future to fix someone else's mistakes. Someone who could never say no. I didn't want to be that person. So I made a choice. I wasn't going to apologize. I wasn't going to beg for understanding. I was going to stand my ground, document everything, and let the truth speak for itself. And if my family couldn't accept that, then maybe they were never really my family to begin with. The lawsuit came 3 weeks later. I was at work when the process server showed up, handing me a thick manila envelope in front of my coworkers. I signed for it, my face burning, and retreated to my car to read it. The filing was 23 pages long. My parents, Richard and Karen Bennett, were suing me for unjust enrichment and breach of implicit contract. They claimed the allowance they provided was contingent on future familial reciprocity, and that by refusing to support Natalie, I had violated the terms of our agreement. They were seeking $288,000, the exact amount they deposited over 6 years, plus interest. The document was cold, clinical, full of legal language that turned years of family history into transactional clauses. But what gutted me was the section titled Plaintiff's Testimony. In it, my mother described me as financially reckless and emotionally selfish. My father claimed I'd explicitly promised to help Natalie when the time came, a promise I had no memory of making. And Natalie provided a statement saying I'd emotionally manipulated her by offering help, then withdrawing it when she needed it most. Every word was a distortion. Every claim a half-truth wrapped in malice. I sat in my car and cried for the second time since this started. Not because I thought I'd lose, but because the people who were supposed to love me had weaponized that love. They turned care into obligation, generosity into debt. And now they were trying to take everything I'd built. I called Marcus immediately. I got the lawsuit, I said. I know, he replied. They copied me. Don't panic. We're going to fight this. And we're going to win. The days after receiving the lawsuit felt like living underwater. Everything was muffled, distant, like I was watching my own life happen to someone else. I went to work, sat in meetings, responded to emails, but I couldn't tell you what any of them were about. My mind was stuck on those 23 pages, on the words my parents had used to describe me. Financially reckless. Emotionally selfish. Words that didn't match the person I knew myself to be, but that apparently matched who they decided I was. Marcus scheduled a meeting for that Friday. When I arrived at his office, he had the lawsuit spread across his desk, sections highlighted in different colors. He'd made notes in the margins, small neat handwriting that suggested he'd been through this document multiple times already. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Let's break this down so you understand exactly what we're dealing with. He walked me through each section, translating the legal jargon into plain language. The core of their argument rested on something called an implied contract. They were claiming that by accepting the monthly deposits, I'd entered into an unspoken agreement to provide financial support to family members in need. It's creative, Marcus said, but it's weak. Implied contracts require evidence of mutual understanding. They'd need to prove you knew the money came with conditions, and that you agreed to those conditions. Do they have that evidence? I shook my head. My dad said it was help while I got on my feet. He said when I was stable I could stop accepting it. He never mentioned Natalie. He never said I'd owe anything back. Then we have a strong defense, Marcus said. We'll argue the deposits were gifts, which is what they were. We'll show that gifts by definition don't create debt. And we'll present evidence of your substantial voluntary support for your sister, which demonstrates you weren't withholding help, just refusing an unreasonable demand. What about the part where they say I promised to help Natalie? I asked. My father claims I said I would. Did you? I tried to remember. There had been conversations over the years, family dinners where my mother had mentioned how hard things were for Natalie, how much the kids needed. I'd said things like, of course I'll help, or I'm here for her. But those were general statements, the kind of thing anyone would say. They weren't promises to fund a mortgage. If you never made a specific, documented promise to pay for housing or ongoing expenses, then their claim is hearsay, Marcus said. Your word against theirs. And in civil court, they bear the burden of proof. He flipped to another section. Now this part is interesting. They're also claiming emotional distress. They say your refusal to help has caused them psychological harm and damaged family relationships. Can they actually argue that? I asked. They can argue anything, Marcus said. Whether a judge will take it seriously is another matter. Emotional distress claims require proof of severe impact. We're talking therapy records, medical documentation, evidence that your actions caused measurable harm. Do you think they have that? I didn't know. My mother was dramatic, prone to tears and proclamations, but I couldn't imagine her sitting in a therapist's office talking about me. My father was stoic, the kind of man who thought therapy was for other people. And Natalie was genuinely struggling, but that struggle had started long before I said no. It's possible, I said finally. My mother might have seen someone. Marcus made a note. We'll find out during discovery. If they're claiming damages, they'll have to produce evidence. And if they can't, that claim falls apart. The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end, I had a stack of homework. Marcus needed me to gather every piece of documentation I could find. Bank statements showing the deposits and how I'd used them. Records of payments I'd made to Natalie or for the kids. Emails, texts, anything that showed the context of our relationship and the help I'd already provided. He also wanted character references, people who could speak to my relationship with my family and my pattern of generosity. Start with friends, he said. Then think about coworkers, anyone who's seen you interact with your family, or who knows your character. Avoid relatives if possible. They're likely compromised. I left his office with a sense of purpose but also dread. The process of fighting this was going to require me to revisit every painful moment, to document not just the money but the emotions, the expectations, the slow erosion of boundaries that had led to this point. That weekend, I holed up in my apartment and started going through everything. I pulled up 6 years of bank statements, highlighting each $4,000 deposit from my father. Then I traced where that money had gone. Rent, student loans, savings, investments. I made spreadsheets, color-coded categories, built a financial timeline that showed I hadn't been reckless or wasteful. I'd been responsible. Then I went through my records of support for Natalie. Venmo transactions for groceries and kids' expenses. Checks I'd written for furniture and school programs. Text exchanges where she'd thanked me, where she'd said she didn't know what she'd do without me. I compiled it all into a document, organized by date and category. By Sunday night, I had a file that was over 60 pages long. It felt strange reducing years of family life to numbers and screenshots, but it also felt necessary. This was proof. Proof that I'd cared, that I'd helped, that I wasn't the villain they were painting me to be. On Monday, I reached out to Vanessa about the character reference. She agreed immediately. I'll tell them exactly who you are, she said. Someone who shows up, who cares, who gives more than she takes. You've been that person since I met you. Do you need me to write something or will they interview me? Marcus will probably want a written statement, I said. Just be honest. I'm honest, she said. That's why this is easy. Work became more complicated. I hadn't told anyone at the office about the lawsuit, but the stress was starting to show. I was distracted in meetings, slow to respond to emails, missing deadlines I'd normally hit without thinking. My boss pulled me aside one afternoon. Bennett, what's going on? She asked. You've been off for weeks now. If something's happening in your personal life, you can tell me. I hesitated. I'd always kept my personal and professional lives separate, but I was running out of energy to maintain the wall between them. It's a family situation, I said carefully. It's gotten complicated, and I'm dealing with some legal issues. Nothing criminal, I added quickly. Just a civil dispute. She nodded slowly. Do you need time off? I considered it. Part of me wanted to say yes, to take a week and disappear, to stop pretending I was fine. But another part of me knew that work was the only thing keeping me grounded, the only place where I still felt competent and in control. I'll let you know, I said. Right now I'm managing. But thank you. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for early November, about 6 weeks after I received the lawsuit. Marcus explained that this wasn't the trial itself, just a meeting where both sides would present their basic arguments, and the judge would decide if the case had enough merit to proceed. It's possible the judge will dismiss it outright, he said. If they can't establish a prima facie case, meaning basic evidence that you owe them anything, the suit won't move forward. What are the chances of that? I asked. Honestly, 50-50. Your parents have a weak case, but they've framed it in a way that might convince a judge to let it proceed to discovery. If that happens, we'll have to go through the full process. The idea of months more of this, of depositions and document requests and legal battles, made me feel sick. But I didn't have a choice. They'd started this. I had to see it through. The week before the hearing, something unexpected happened. My grandfather called. Olivia, he said, his voice tight. I need to tell you something. Your parents came to see us yesterday. My stomach dropped. What did they want? They asked us to testify on their behalf, he said. They want us to tell the court that they raised you well, that they deserve to be repaid for their investment. What did you say? I told them no, he said flatly. I told them they were wrong to do this, that they twisted something good into something ugly. Your grandmother and I, we don't support this lawsuit. We think it's shameful. There was a pause. Your mother didn't take it well. What happened? She said if we didn't stand with them, we were choosing you over her. She said we'd regret it. My grandfather's voice hardened. I told her the only thing I regretted was raising a daughter who thought love came with a price tag. I felt tears prick my eyes. Grandpa, I'm sorry. You shouldn't have to be in the middle of this. We're not in the middle, he said. We're on your side. And we're going to make sure the court knows it. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and cried for the third time. Not from sadness, but from relief. I wasn't alone. I had people who believed me, who saw through the distortions and stood by me anyway. It didn't erase the pain of losing my parents and sister, but it reminded me that family wasn't just about blood. It was about who showed up when things got hard. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through worst-case scenarios. What if the judge believed them? What if I lost and had to pay back nearly $300,000? What if this dragged on for years, draining my savings and my sanity? I got up around 3 in the morning and made tea, sat on my couch in the dark, and tried to calm my racing thoughts. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. You awake? Yeah, I replied. Can't sleep. Me either, she wrote. I'm nervous for you. Want company? 20 minutes later, she was at my door with a bag of donuts and 2 coffees. We sat on my couch eating sugar and talking about everything except the hearing. She told me about her job, about a guy she'd gone on a date with who'd spent the entire evening talking about his ex, about her plans to adopt a dog. It was normal, mundane, exactly what I needed. When the sun finally started to rise, she squeezed my hand. You're going to be okay, she said. No matter what happens today, you're going to be okay. I wanted to believe her. The Maricopa County Courthouse was a sprawling concrete building downtown, the kind of place that felt designed to intimidate. I met Marcus in the lobby, and we went through security together. He was calm, professional, carrying a leather briefcase that looked expensive and serious. You ready? He asked. As I'll ever be, I said. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, more like a conference room than the dramatic spaces you see on TV. There were rows of benches, a judge's bench at the front, tables for each side. My parents were already seated on the left side with their attorney, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and a stern expression. Natalie sat behind them, her hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. I took my seat next to Marcus, and a moment later my grandparents entered. They sat directly behind me, and my grandmother reached forward to touch my shoulder. We're here, she whispered. The judge entered and we all stood. He was younger than I expected, maybe in his early 50s, with dark hair going gray at the temples and an expression that gave nothing away. He sat, gestured for us to do the same, and opened the file in front of him. This is the matter of Bennett versus Bennett, he said. I've reviewed the initial filings. Let's hear opening statements. Plaintiffs, you're up first. The attorney for my parents stood. She was polished, confident, and she laid out their case with precision. Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of unjust enrichment. The plaintiffs, Richard and Karen Bennett, provided their daughter with substantial financial support over a period of 6 years, totaling $288,000. This support was given with the understanding that the defendant would, in turn, provide assistance to her sister during a time of crisis. When called upon to fulfill this obligation, the defendant refused, despite having the financial means to help. The plaintiffs are simply seeking reimbursement for support that was provided under false pretenses. She made it sound so reasonable, so clear-cut. Like I'd tricked them, taken their money and run. Marcus stood when she finished. Your Honor, the defendant categorically denies these allegations. The money provided by Mr. Bennett was a gift, freely given, with no conditions attached. Gifts do not create debt. There was no contract, implied or otherwise. Furthermore, the defendant has provided substantial voluntary financial support to her sister over the past 2 years, well over $15,000, in addition to non-monetary assistance. This lawsuit is an attempt to retroactively impose obligations that were never agreed upon. The judge leaned back, looking between both attorneys. Let's start with the basics, he said. Mr. Bennett, did you ever tell your daughter the money was a loan? My father stood. Not in those words, Your Honor. But the understanding was always that family helps family. When she was established, she'd help others. So you didn't explicitly state it was conditional, the judge clarified. No, my father admitted. But it was implied. The judge made a note. And Ms. Bennett, when you accepted these deposits, did you understand them to be loans? I stood, my legs shaking. No, Your Honor. My father told me it was help while I got on my feet. He said when I was stable I could stop accepting it. He never mentioned my sister. He never said there would be future obligations. The judge nodded. Sit. He turned to my parents' attorney. Counselor, do you have documentation showing the defendant agreed to any terms of repayment or future support? We have testimony from the plaintiffs, she said. They can attest to conversations where the defendant expressed willingness to help family members in need. Expressed willingness is not a contract, the judge said. Do you have anything in writing? Emails, texts, signed agreements? We do not, she admitted. But the pattern of behavior suggests an understanding. The judge looked unimpressed. And you, he said, turning to Marcus. Do you have evidence of the defendant's financial support for her sister? We do, Marcus said. He handed over a thick folder. Bank records, receipts, and correspondence showing over $15,000 in direct assistance over the past 2 years, as well as non-monetary support including childcare and logistical help. The judge flipped through the documents, his expression neutral. Then he looked up. Here's my concern, he said. The plaintiffs are asking me to enforce an obligation that was never clearly defined. They're asking me to rule that gifts can be retroactively classified as loans based on unspoken expectations. That's not how contract law works. He paused. However, I'm also aware that family dynamics are complex, and I don't want to dismiss a case prematurely if there's legitimate cause for dispute. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to allow this case to proceed to limited discovery. Both sides will have 30 days to produce additional evidence. If, at the end of that period, the plaintiff still cannot demonstrate a clear agreement or obligation, I'll dismiss the case with prejudice. My heart sank. It wasn't a win, but it wasn't a loss either. It was more time, more stress, more fighting. Marcus leaned over and whispered, this is actually good. It means he's skeptical of their case. If we can produce solid evidence, he'll throw it out. As we filed out of the courtroom, I avoided looking at my parents, but I felt their eyes on me, cold and accusing. In the hallway, my grandmother hugged me tightly. You did well, she said. You held your ground. My grandfather shook Marcus's hand. What happens now? Discovery, Marcus said. They'll request documents from us and we'll request documents from them. It's a fact-finding process. If they don't have evidence of an agreement, and I don't think they do, this will be over soon. I wanted to believe him. But as I walked out of the courthouse into the bright Phoenix sun, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. That my family wouldn't stop until they'd extracted every ounce of pain they could, and that no matter how this ended, nothing would ever be the same. Discovery turned out to be exactly as exhausting as Marcus had warned. Within a week of the preliminary hearing, my parents' attorney filed a request for documents that was 12 pages long. They wanted every bank statement I'd ever had, every email exchange with my family, every text message, every scrap of evidence that might suggest I'd agreed to their version of events. Marcus filed our own requests in return. We asked for documentation of the deposits my father had made, any written communication about the terms of the money, records of their financial situation, and any evidence that I'd made specific promises about supporting Natalie. The process felt invasive, like surgery without anesthesia. I spent hours going through old emails, scrolling back through years of text messages, reliving conversations I'd forgotten or tried to forget. Some of it was mundane birthday wishes and holiday plans. Some of it was painful messages from my mother asking why I wasn't more involved, why I didn't visit more, why I couldn't be more like Natalie. I found one email from 3 years ago where my father had written, "Your sister could really use your help right now," and I'd responded, "Of course, I'm here for whatever she needs." My parents' attorney would probably use that as evidence of a promise. But reading it in context, it was clear I'd been talking about emotional support, about being available, not about funding her entire life. I also found evidence I'd forgotten about. A text exchange from 2 years ago where Natalie had thanked me for paying her electric bill when she'd been short that month. Another where I'd sent her money for Tyler's birthday party. A long email where I'd helped her write a letter to her landlord about repairs. Every piece of evidence showed the same pattern, me helping when asked, giving freely, never expecting repayment. It wasn't proof of an obligation. It was proof of love. But I wasn't sure my parents would see the difference. The hardest part was the deposition. Marcus had explained it to me in advance. My parents' attorney would ask me questions under oath, and my answers would be recorded and could be used in court. "It's not a trial," he'd said, "but it's serious. Answer honestly, don't volunteer extra information, and if you're not sure about something, say so. Don't guess." The deposition was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in the attorney's office, a sterile conference room with a long table and uncomfortable chairs. My parents weren't there, but their attorney was, along with a court reporter who set up a small machine to record everything. Marcus sat beside me, and before we started, he squeezed my shoulder. "You've got this," he said. "Just tell the truth." The attorney started with basic questions. My name, my address, my occupation. Then she moved into family history. "Describe your relationship with your parents growing up." "It was complicated," I said. "My sister was always the favorite. I felt like I had to work harder to get their attention or approval." "Did you feel resentful about that?" "Sometimes," I admitted. But I understood it. Natalie was easier to love. She fit the mold they wanted. The attorney made a note. "And when your father started sending you money, how did you feel?" "Grateful," I said. "And a little confused. I hadn't asked for it, but he insisted. He said he wanted to help me get established." "Did he ever tell you the money was a loan?" "No." "Did he ever tell you there were conditions attached?" "No. He said it was help, that when I was stable I could stop accepting it." "And did you ever make a promise to support your sister financially?" I paused, thinking carefully. I told her I'd help her however I could. But I was talking about emotional support, being there for her and the kids. I never promised to pay for a house. The attorney leaned forward. "But you did provide financial support to her, correct?" "Yes," I said. "Over $15,000 in the past 2 years. So you understood you had a responsibility to help her." "I understood that I wanted to help her," I corrected. "There's a difference between wanting to help and being obligated to." The attorney's expression didn't change, but I could tell she wasn't happy with my answer. "Let's talk about the meeting at your parents' house," she said. "When they told you about the house in Gilbert. Walk me through what happened." I described the ambush, the mortgage documents on the table, the expectation that I'd take over the payments. "And when they asked you to help, what did you say?" "I said I couldn't do it. That I'd already helped, and that taking on a mortgage for a house I wasn't consulted about was too much." "Did you consider the impact on your nephews?" "Of course I did," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "I love Tyler and Chloe. But I also had to consider my own future, my own stability. I can't light myself on fire to keep someone else warm." The attorney paused. "That's a very selfish way of looking at family." "That's not a question," Marcus interjected. "Move on, counselor." The deposition lasted 3 hours. By the end, I was exhausted, my throat dry from talking, my mind spinning from the constant need to be careful, to be precise, to not give them anything they could twist. When it was finally over, Marcus walked me to my car. "You did great," he said. "She tried to rattle you, but you stayed calm. Do you think it helped our case?" "I think it didn't hurt," he said. "And that's what matters." The discovery period revealed something I hadn't expected. My parents couldn't produce any evidence of an agreement. No emails, no text, no written documentation that the money came with strings attached. Their case rested entirely on their testimony and their interpretation of vague conversations. Marcus was thrilled. "This is exactly what we need," he said. "Without documentation, their claim falls apart." But they did produce one thing that caught me off guard. A ledger my father had kept, a detailed spreadsheet showing every deposit he'd made to my account, the date, the amount, and a running total. At the bottom, he'd written, "To be reconciled upon family need." I stared at it, my stomach churning. He'd been tracking it the whole time. Planning for this. "What does this mean?" I asked Marcus. "Does it prove I owed them?" "No," he said firmly. "This is his personal record. It doesn't prove you knew about it or agreed to it. If anything, it shows he was keeping score, which supports our argument that this was manipulative from the start." Still, the ledger haunted me. It meant my father had been thinking about this for years, had been building a case in his mind, waiting for the moment to cash in. Every deposit hadn't been an act of love. It had been an investment, just like they'd said. And I'd been too naive to see it. The final hearing was set for mid-December, almost 3 months after the lawsuit had been filed. By then I was running on fumes. I'd lost weight, wasn't sleeping, and had started having panic attacks at random moments, my chest tightening, my breath coming in short gasps. Vanessa noticed. "You need to take care of yourself," she said one night over dinner. "This is killing you." "I know," I said. "But I don't know how to stop it." "You can't control what they do," she said. "But you can control how you respond. You can let this destroy you, or you can decide right now that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay." I wanted to believe her, but I wasn't sure I could. The night before the final hearing, I couldn't eat. I sat in my apartment staring at the wall, thinking about everything I'd lost. My parents, who I'd never been close to but had always hoped might one day see me. My sister, who I'd loved despite everything, who I tried to help until it nearly broke me. My extended family, who'd turned on me without asking my side. And my sense of safety, the belief that family meant something, that blood ties were supposed to protect you, not destroy you. I thought about calling my parents, about trying one more time to explain, to make them understand. But I knew it wouldn't matter. They'd made up their minds. I was the villain in their story, and nothing I said would change that. So instead, I called my grandmother. "Grandma," I said when she picked up. "I'm scared." "I know, sweetheart," she said. "But you're doing the right thing. Even if it doesn't feel like it. What if I lose?" "Then you lose," she said simply. "But you'll still have yourself. You'll still have your integrity. They can't take that unless you give it to them." The courtroom was more crowded for the final hearing. My parents had brought reinforcements, Aunt Denise, Uncle Greg, a few cousins I barely recognized. They sat behind my parents like a wall of judgment. On my side sat my grandparents, Vanessa, and a coworker named Lisa who'd offered to come for moral support. The imbalance was obvious, a physical representation of how isolated I'd become. The judge entered and we all stood. He looked tired, like he'd been dealing with cases like this all week and was ready for it to be over. He sat, reviewed his notes, and then looked up. "I've reviewed the discovery materials from both sides," he said. "I've read the depositions, examined the evidence, and considered the arguments. I'm ready to make a ruling." My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The plaintiffs argue that the defendant received financial support with the implicit understanding she would reciprocate when needed. The judge continued. They claim this constitutes an implied contract or an obligation of unjust enrichment. However, after reviewing the evidence, I find this argument unpersuasive. He paused, glancing at my parents. Gifts by definition do not create debt. The defendant's father provided monthly deposits that were described as help, not loans. There is no written agreement, no documented terms, no evidence that the defendant understood or agreed to any conditions of repayment. The plaintiffs have produced a personal ledger showing they tracked these deposits. However, this ledger was not shared with the defendant and does not prove mutual agreement. If anything, it suggests the plaintiffs unilaterally decided to impose obligations that were never communicated. The courtroom was silent. My parents' attorney started to stand, but the judge held up a hand. Furthermore, the evidence shows the defendant has provided substantial voluntary support to her sister, over $15,000 in documented assistance, in addition to time and emotional labor. This demonstrates the defendant was not unwilling to help, but rather unwilling to accept an unreasonable and unilateral demand. He looked directly at my parents now, his expression stern. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, I understand family relationships are complicated. I understand you're worried about your daughter and grandchildren. But you cannot sue someone for refusing to accept obligations they never agreed to. You cannot retroactively transform gifts into loans because the outcome didn't meet your expectations. This lawsuit is without merit, and it is dismissed with prejudice. He brought his gavel down and it was over. I sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Marcus leaned over. We won, he said. It's over. Behind me, my grandmother started crying quiet tears of relief. Vanessa grabbed my hand and squeezed. Across the aisle, my mother was sobbing into my father's shoulder. Natalie sat with her head in her hands. And for a moment, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph but sadness. Sadness that it had come to this, that love had been replaced by lawsuits, that my family had chosen money over me. As people started filing out, my father caught my eye. His expression was hard, unreadable. Then he turned and walked away without a word. Outside the courthouse, my grandparents hugged me tightly. We're so proud of you, my grandfather said. You stood up for yourself. That takes courage. Vanessa suggested we go celebrate, but I didn't feel like celebrating. I felt hollow, like I'd won the battle but lost something bigger in the process. That night, alone in my apartment, I let myself cry. Not because I regretted my decision, but because I grieved what I'd lost. The fantasy of a family that loved me unconditionally. The hope that someday my parents would see me for who I was. The belief that blood ties meant something unbreakable. The week after the hearing, I received one final email from my mother. No subject line, just a single sentence. We will never forgive you for this. I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. But 2 days later I got a different message, this one from Natalie. It was longer, rambling, full of typos like she'd written it in a hurry. Olivia, I don't know what to say. I've been thinking about everything that happened, about how we got here. I know you're probably angry, and you have every right to be. But I need you to know I never wanted it to go this far. Mom and Dad, they convinced me you owed us. They said you've been living off them for years and it was time to give back. I believed them because it was easier than admitting I'd made bad choices, that I'd married the wrong person, that I couldn't provide for my kids the way they deserved. The truth is, I've been jealous of you for a long time. You've always been smarter, more independent. You didn't need anyone, and I hated that. I hated that you could just walk away from all of this and be fine. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I read the email 3 times, then closed my laptop. I didn't respond to that one either. Maybe someday I would, but not now. Not when the wound was still fresh. In January I started therapy. My therapist, a woman named Dr. Patel, was patient and direct in equal measure. She didn't let me minimize what had happened, didn't let me pretend I was fine when I wasn't. You've experienced a significant betrayal, she said during one session. Your parents weaponized your trust. That's trauma, and it's okay to acknowledge that. Over the following months I started to rebuild. I changed my phone number, set strict boundaries around contact, and focused on the people who had stood by me. Vanessa, my grandparents, the small circle of friends who'd never questioned my side of the story. I also started dating again. I'd avoided it during the lawsuit, too consumed by stress to even think about letting someone new into my life. But in February, a friend set me up with a guy named Daniel, a teacher who loved hiking and made terrible jokes. Our first date was awkward, both of us nervous and overeager. But by the 3rd date, I found myself laughing in a way I hadn't in months. He didn't ask about my family right away, didn't push for details I wasn't ready to share. He just let me be myself, unfiltered and imperfect. When I finally told him the story weeks later, he listened without interrupting. Then he said, "Your family didn't deserve you. I hope you know that." I didn't know if I believed him yet, but it felt good to hear. In March, I got a call from my grandmother. She sounded excited. "Your grandfather and I have been talking," she said. "We want to update our will, and we want you to know you're going to be okay. Grandma, you don't have to do this. We're not doing it because we have to," she said. "We're doing it because it's right. You've been through enough. We want to make sure you're taken care of." A few weeks later, I learned my parents had tried one more time to get early access to their inheritance. My grandparents had refused again, firmly and finally. Your mother called me selfish, my grandmother told me. I told her I learned from the best. By spring I'd started looking at houses. Not because I needed more space, but because I wanted something that was entirely mine, a place my family had no claim to, no history with. I found a small 2-bedroom in Gilbert. Ironic given that was where Natalie's dream house had been. But this one was mine. It had a backyard big enough for a garden, a porch where I could sit and drink coffee in the mornings, and walls I could paint any color I wanted. The day I closed on it, Vanessa brought champagne, and we toasted to new beginnings. I planted tomatoes in the backyard, adopted a cat from the shelter, a gray tabby I named Pepper, and slowly made the house feel like home. My grandparents visited often, helping with repairs, bringing casseroles and old photo albums. Daniel started staying over on weekends, and by summer we were talking about the future in a way that felt hopeful instead of terrifying. I didn't hear from my parents again. I didn't hear from Natalie either, except for one brief email in April letting me know she'd moved back in with our parents and was renting out the Gilbert house to cover the mortgage. The boys are okay, she wrote. In case you were wondering. I was wondering, but I didn't reply. One Sunday in June, I was sitting on my porch with coffee when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Tyler. Aunt Natalie gave me your number. I miss you. Can we talk sometime? I stared at it for a long time, my chest tight. Tyler was 9 now, old enough to start asking questions, old enough to notice I'd disappeared. I didn't know what Natalie had told him, what version of the story he'd grown up hearing. But I also knew he was a kid, and none of this was his fault. I texted back. Hi Tyler. I miss you too. Let me think about it, okay? He replied immediately. Okay. Love you. Love you too, I wrote, and I meant it. I didn't know if I'd ever reconnect with him and Chloe, didn't know if it was safe or fair to any of us. But for the first time in months, the idea didn't fill me with dread. It filled me with something lighter, possibility. That night, Daniel and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. He reached for my hand. You seem lighter, he said. Like you're finally letting yourself breathe. I am, I said. It's been a long time coming. He smiled. I'm glad you're here. Me too, I said. And I realized I meant it. I was glad. Glad I'd said no, glad I'd fought, glad I'd chosen myself even when it cost me everything. Because what I'd gained was something no one could take away. Peace. Boundaries. A life that was mine. My parents still thought I'd abandoned them. My extended family still whispered about me at gatherings I was no longer invited to. But I'd stopped waiting for their approval, stopped hoping they'd see me differently. I'd built a life without them, and it was good. Better than I'd imagined it could be. Some nights I still felt the ache of what I'd lost. The fantasy of family dinners where I was included, of holidays where I wasn't the outsider. But I also knew those fantasies had never been real. I'd been chasing a version of love that didn't exist, trying to earn something that should have been given freely. Now I was done chasing. I was done shrinking myself to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. I was done letting guilt masquerade as love. I had a house with yellow walls and tomato plants. I had a partner who saw me, really saw me. I had grandparents who chose me every single day. I had friends who showed up. And I had myself whole and unbroken, no longer asking for permission to live my own life. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The months after the lawsuit settled into a rhythm I hadn't expected. There was no dramatic transformation, no moment where everything suddenly felt okay. Instead, healing came in small increments, quiet mornings where I woke up without the immediate weight of dread, afternoons where I caught myself laughing without remembering to feel guilty about it. I'd always thought recovery from something like this would be linear, a steady climb from pain to peace. But it wasn't like that at all. Some days I felt strong, certain I'd made the right choice. Other days I'd see a mother and daughter shopping together or hear a song that reminded me of childhood, and the grief would hit me like a wave. Dr. Patel helped me understand that both could be true simultaneously. You can grieve what you lost and still know you made the right decision, she told me during one session. Those feelings aren't contradictory. They're just honest. I started journaling, something I'd never done before. Writing down thoughts I couldn't say out loud. I wrote about the good memories, the few that existed. My father teaching me to ride a bike, patient and steady behind me until I found my balance. My mother braiding my hair before school, her hands gentle even when she pulled too tight. Natalie and I building blanket forts in the living room, pretending we were explorers in an unknown land. Those memories were real, but they existed alongside the others. The forgetting, the comparisons, the slow accumulation of moments where I'd felt invisible. I was learning that people could be both, capable of kindness and cruelty, love and manipulation. Understanding that didn't make it hurt less, but it made it make sense. Work became a refuge again. I'd been promoted in April, a recognition of projects I barely remembered completing during the worst of the lawsuit. My new role came with more responsibility, a small team to manage, and creative freedom I'd been craving. I threw myself into it, not as an escape but as a reminder that I was capable, that I had value beyond what my family had assigned me. One of my team members, a woman named Jade who was fresh out of college, reminded me of myself at that age. Eager, hardworking, desperate to prove herself. During a one-on-one meeting, she confided that her parents were pressuring her to move back home, to save money and help with family expenses. I don't know what to do, she said. I want to help them, but I also want to build my own life. What would you do? I thought carefully before answering. I'd set boundaries, I said. I'd help in ways that don't compromise your future. But I'd also be clear about what you can and can't do. Because if you don't set those limits, other people will set them for you. She nodded slowly. Did you have to do that with your family? I did, I said. And it cost me. But it also saved me. I didn't elaborate, didn't share the details of the lawsuit or the estrangement. But I could see something shift in her expression, a recognition that she wasn't alone in struggling with these questions. Later that week, she sent me an email thanking me for the advice. I talked to my parents, she wrote. I told them I'd help with small things but couldn't move back home. It was hard, but I think they understood. I'm still figuring it out, but I feel better knowing I can say no. Reading her message made me realize something. My story, painful as it was, wasn't just mine. It was part of a larger pattern. Families asking too much, love being confused with obligation, boundaries being treated as betrayal. And maybe in some small way, sharing what I'd learned could help someone else avoid the same traps. Summer in Phoenix was brutal, the kind of heat that made you question every life choice that had led you to live in a desert. But I loved it anyway. I loved the way the sky looked at sunset, all orange and pink and purple. I loved the sound of monsoon storms rolling in, the brief relief of rain. I loved sitting on my porch in the early mornings before the heat became unbearable. Coffee in hand, pepper curled at my feet. Daniel and I had fallen into an easy rhythm. He'd sleep over a few nights a week, cook breakfast while I got ready for work, leave little notes on the counter that made me smile. You're beautiful and also we're out of milk. He wasn't perfect. He left dishes in the sink and had a terrible habit of losing his keys. But he was kind, consistently and genuinely kind, in a way I hadn't experienced before. One evening in July, we were sitting on the couch watching a movie when he paused it suddenly. I need to ask you something, he said. My stomach tightened. That phrase never led anywhere good. What's up? He turned to face me. I know things with your family are complicated. And I know you're still healing from all of it. But I need to know if you see a future with me. If this is going somewhere or if I'm just a distraction while you figure things out. I stared at him, caught off guard. Where is this coming from? He sighed. My ex used to say I was too available, too easy. That I didn't challenge her enough. And I'm worried I'm doing the same thing with you. Just being here without asking for what I need. What do you need? I asked. I need to know you're in this, he said. That I'm not just helping you pass the time until you're ready for something real. His honesty disarmed me. I'd been so focused on protecting myself, on not letting anyone too close, that I hadn't stopped to consider what he might need. I'm in this, I said. I'm scared and I'm still figuring things out, but I'm in this. You're not a distraction. You're the best thing that's happened to me in a really long time. He smiled, relieved. Okay, good. That's all I needed to hear. We went back to the movie, but something had shifted. A door I'd been holding closed had opened slightly, letting him further in. In August, I received an unexpected package. No return address, just my name and address written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a photo album, old and worn, filled with pictures I'd never seen before. Me as a baby, held by my grandmother. Me and Natalie as kids playing in a sprinkler. My parents young and smiling, looking nothing like the people I knew now. At the bottom of the box was a note from my grandmother. I found this in the attic. I thought you should have it. No matter what's happened, you're still part of this family's history. I spent the afternoon looking through the album, studying the faces of people I'd loved and lost. There was a photo of me at 6 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, holding a certificate for perfect attendance. My father's hand rested on my shoulder, and he looked proud. I didn't remember that moment, didn't remember him ever looking at me that way. But the photo proved it had happened, even if only once. It made me realize that the past wasn't as simple as I'd made it out to be. There had been good moments, even if they were outnumbered by the bad. And holding on to the anger, justified as it was, meant holding on to all of it. I wasn't ready to forgive, might never be ready. But I could acknowledge the complexity, could hold space for the fact that my parents had loved me in their own broken way, even if that love hadn't been enough. In September, I finally responded to Tyler's text. I'd been thinking about it for months, weighing the risks and benefits, trying to decide if reopening that door was wise or just asking for more pain. But I couldn't ignore the pull, the desire to be in his life, to be someone he could count on. I suggested we meet for ice cream, something neutral and low stakes. Natalie agreed to bring him, and we chose a place halfway between our homes. When I arrived, they were already there, Tyler taller than I remembered, all long limbs and serious eyes. Chloe was with them too, shy and uncertain, hiding behind her mother's legs. Aunt Olivia, Tyler said, his voice uncertain. Hey buddy, I said, kneeling down to his level. I've missed you. He hugged me, quick and fierce, and I felt something in my chest crack open. We got ice cream and sat at a picnic table outside. Tyler told me about school, about his soccer team, about a book series he was obsessed with. Chloe slowly warmed up, eventually climbing into my lap to show me a drawing she'd made. Natalie stayed quiet, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. When the kids ran off to play on a nearby playground, she finally spoke. Thank you for coming, she said. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either, I admitted. She looked down at her hands. I meant what I said in that email. I'm sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I regret how everything went down. I nodded. I'm not ready to go back to how things were, I said. I don't know if I ever will be. But I don't want to punish Tyler and Chloe for decisions the adults made. That's fair, she said quietly. For what it's worth, I've been going to therapy, trying to figure out why I let Mom and Dad convince me you owed us anything. It's been hard, realizing how much I bought into their narrative. I appreciated the honesty, even if it didn't erase what had happened. We sat in silence for a while, watching the kids play, and I realized this was probably the best we could hope for. Not reconciliation, but coexistence. A fragile truce built on love for two kids who hadn't asked to be caught in the middle. Before I left, Tyler hugged me again. Can we do this again? He asked. Yeah, I said. We can do this again. On the drive home, I cried, not from sadness but from release. I've been carrying so much fear about what reconnecting might cost me, but seeing Tyler and Chloe reminded me that some relationships were worth the risk. October brought cooler weather and a sense of possibility. Daniel and I started talking seriously about the future, about what we wanted and whether we wanted it together. He was careful not to push, but I could tell he was ready for more commitment, something concrete that signaled we were building towards something permanent. One night, lying in bed, I asked him what he wanted from life. He thought for a moment. I want to be a good teacher, he said. I want to travel more, see places I've only read about. I want a family someday, kids or dogs or both. And I want a partner who sees me, who challenges me, who doesn't need me but chooses me anyway. He turned to look at me. What do you want? I want peace, I said. I want a life where I'm not constantly bracing for the next crisis. I want to build something that's mine, something no one can take away. And I want someone who understands that my past is messy but doesn't define me. He kissed my forehead. I think we might want the same things. I think we might, I agreed. By November, I'd settled into a version of myself I barely recognized but deeply appreciated. I was more confident, more certain of my boundaries, more willing to walk away from situations that didn't serve me. I'd also started volunteering at a local nonprofit that helped women leaving difficult family situations, offering financial literacy workshops and one-on-one coaching. It was my way of turning my experience into something useful, of helping others avoid the traps I'd fallen into. During one workshop, a woman in her 40s approached me afterward. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaking. "I've been feeling so guilty about cutting off my family, but hearing you talk about boundaries made me realize I'm not a bad person for protecting myself." "You're not," I said. "You're brave." She started crying and I hugged her, this stranger who understood in a way most people didn't. That moment reminded me why I was doing this work, why sharing my story mattered. Pain had a way of isolating you, making you think you were the only one struggling. But when you spoke up, when you admitted the truth, you created space for others to do the same. In December, my grandparents invited me over for dinner. When I arrived, the table was set for 4, and I assumed Daniel was joining us. But instead, sitting in the 4th chair was my grandfather's lawyer. "Olivia," my grandmother said, "we wanted to talk to you about our estate. We're getting older, and we want to make sure everything is clear." The lawyer explained that they'd updated their will, leaving the bulk of their estate to me. "Your mother is still included," he said, "but the majority goes to you. They wanted you to know now so there are no surprises later." I looked at my grandparents, overwhelmed. "You didn't have to do this." "We know," my grandfather said. "But we wanted to. You've been through enough. This is our way of making sure you're taken care of, that you have a foundation no one can take from you." I cried then, not from sadness but from gratitude. They'd chosen me, consistently and without hesitation, and that choice had meant everything. As the year came to a close, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed. A year ago, I'd been in the middle of a lawsuit, drowning in stress and uncertainty. Now I had a home I loved, a partner who saw me, work that fulfilled me, and relationships that nurtured rather than drained me. I'd lost my parents, lost the fantasy of a family that had never really existed. But I'd gained something more valuable: myself. On New Year's Eve, Daniel and I stayed in, cooking dinner together and watching the countdown on TV. As midnight approached, he pulled me close. "What are you hoping for this year?" he asked. "More of this," I said. "More peace, more clarity, more moments where I feel like myself." He smiled. "I think you're going to get it." When the clock struck 12, we kissed, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate kind, but the solid, grounded kind that comes from knowing you've survived the worst and come out stronger. The new year brought small joys and continued healing. I started taking a pottery class on Wednesday nights, something I'd always wanted to try but never made time for. I wasn't good at it, my bowls lopsided and my mugs uneven, but I loved the process, the feel of clay under my hands, the quiet focus it required. Daniel and I took a weekend trip to Sedona, hiking among red rocks and sleeping under stars. We talked about the future in concrete terms, about timelines and possibilities, and it felt less scary than I'd expected. In February, Tyler's 9th birthday came around. I wasn't invited to the family party, but Natalie asked if I wanted to take him out separately, just the two of us. We went to an arcade, and I watched him play game after game. His face lit up with joy. Afterward, over pizza, he asked me a question I'd been dreading. "Why don't you come to Grandma and Grandpa's house anymore?" I thought carefully about how to answer. "Sometimes adults disagree about important things," I said. "And when that happens, they need space from each other. It doesn't mean I don't love you. It just means I need to take care of myself." He nodded, processing. "Mom said you and Grandma had a fight about money." "We did," I said. "But it wasn't really about money. It was about respect and boundaries." "Do you know what boundaries are?" He shook his head. "Boundaries are like rules you set for yourself," I explained. "They help you stay healthy and happy. Sometimes people don't like your boundaries, but that doesn't mean you should get rid of them." "Oh," he said. "Like when I told Jason he couldn't borrow my games anymore because he never gave them back." "Exactly like that," I said, smiling. "You set a boundary to protect something that mattered to you." He seemed satisfied with that answer, and we moved on to talking about other things. But I was grateful for the conversation, for the chance to plant seeds of understanding that might help him navigate his own relationships someday. In March, something unexpected happened. I ran into my mother at the grocery store. We turned the corner into the same aisle at the same time, and for a moment we just stared at each other. She looked older, more tired, her hair grayer than I remembered. I waited for her to say something, to yell or cry or make a scene. But she just looked at me, her expression unreadable, and then turned her cart around and walked away. I stood there for a long time after she left, my heart pounding, waiting for the emotional fallout. But it didn't come. I felt sad, yes, but also strangely calm. She'd made her choice and I'd made mine. There was nothing left to say. That night I told Daniel what had happened. "How do you feel?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Sad, I guess. But also relieved. Like I don't have to wonder anymore if she misses me or regrets what happened." She made it clear. He pulled me close. "I'm sorry." "Me too," I said. "But I'm also okay." Spring brought new growth in my garden, tomatoes and herbs and flowers I'd planted on a whim. I spent weekend mornings tending to them, pulling weeds and watering, finding peace in the simple act of nurturing something. Pepper would sit nearby, watching me with his inscrutable cat expression, occasionally batting at a butterfly. Life felt quiet in the best way. Not boring but settled, like I'd finally found solid ground. In April, Vanessa got engaged. She called me immediately, screaming with excitement, and I screamed back, genuinely thrilled for her. She asked me to be her maid of honor, and I said yes without hesitation. At her engagement party, surrounded by friends who'd supported me through everything, I realized how much my life had changed. I had community, people who chose to be in my life not out of obligation but because they wanted to be. That was the family I'd built, and it was enough. By summer, Daniel and I had started looking at houses together. Not because we were rushing but because it felt right, like the natural next step. We found a place in Chandler, bigger than my current house, with space for an office and a guest room and a backyard where we could host barbecues. The day we put in an offer, I felt a flutter of anxiety. "What if this is a mistake?" I asked him. "Then we'll figure it out," he said simply. "But I don't think it is." Our offer was accepted in June, and we planned to move in together by August. It felt surreal, the idea of building a life with someone who saw me fully and loved me anyway. I'd spent so long thinking I was unlovable, too difficult, too much. But Daniel proved that wasn't true. I wasn't perfect, but I was enough. On a quiet evening in July, sitting on my porch for one of the last times, I thought about everything that had led me here. The lawsuit, the estrangement, the grief and anger, and slow climb back to myself. It had been brutal, but it had also been necessary. I'd learned who I was when everything was stripped away. I'd learned I could survive, could rebuild, could choose myself even when it cost me everything. And now, looking at the life I'd built, I knew it had been worth it. I had peace. I had love. I had a future that was mine. My parents still didn't speak to me. Natalie and I had a cordial but distant relationship. Most of my extended family still thought I was selfish, but their opinions didn't define me anymore. I knew the truth. I knew I'd done the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. And that knowledge was worth more than their approval ever could be. As the sun set over the Phoenix skyline, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast. To boundaries. To choosing yourself. To the family you build when the one you're born into isn't enough. To survival and strength and second chances. And to the quiet, powerful knowledge that you are enough, exactly as you are, no conditions attached. The $4,000 allowance had cost me my family, but it had also given me something invaluable. Freedom. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. Moving day came on a scorching August morning, when the temperature had already hit 90 degrees by 8. Daniel showed up with his truck and 3 friends from work, all of them ready to haul boxes and furniture in exchange for pizza and beer. I'd been packing for weeks, sorting through belongings I'd accumulated over the years, deciding what to keep and what to let go. It was strange how much lighter I felt with each box I donated, each item I decided I didn't need anymore. I wasn't just moving houses. I was shedding versions of myself that no longer fit. Vanessa arrived around noon with iced coffee and her typical chaotic energy. She took one look at the half-packed living room and shook her head. "You're never going to finish at this rate," she said. "Where do you want me to start?" I pointed to the bookshelf. "Those all need to go in boxes, but I want to keep them organized by genre." She rolled her eyes. "Of course you do." But she started packing anyway, and within an hour we developed a rhythm. By late afternoon, my little house in Gilbert was empty except for cleaning supplies and a few pieces of furniture the new owners were keeping. I stood in the living room one last time, looking at the space that had been my sanctuary, my refuge during the hardest period of my life. This house had witnessed my breakdown and my rebuilding. It had held me while I cried, given me space to heal, provided the foundation I'd needed to become someone new. Leaving it felt bittersweet, like closing a chapter one wasn't entirely ready to finish. "You okay?" Daniel asked, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. "Yeah," I said. "Just saying goodbye." "It's a good house," he said. "Took care of you. Now we get to take care of each other." I leaned back into him. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise," he said. "You're just finally noticing." The new house in Chandler was bigger, brighter, with high ceilings and windows that let in floods of natural light. We spent the first week unpacking, arguing good-naturedly about where furniture should go and how to organize the kitchen. Daniel wanted all the mugs in one cabinet. I wanted them separated by size and function. We compromised by giving him 2 shelves for his chaotic mug collection and keeping the rest organized my way. "It's like living with a librarian," he teased. "You love it," I shot back. "I really do," he said and kissed the top of my head. Pepper adapted quickly, claiming the sunny spot by the living room window as his territory and judging our decorating choices from his perch. We set up the second bedroom as a shared office, his teaching materials on one side, my marketing projects on the other. It felt deeply domestic in a way I'd never experienced before. This blending of lives and routines and small daily decisions. One night, about 2 weeks after we'd moved in, we were cooking dinner together when Daniel's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's my mom," he said. "Give me a second." I nodded and kept chopping vegetables while he stepped onto the back patio to take the call. He was gone for almost 20 minutes, and when he came back inside, his expression was troubled. "Everything okay?" I asked. He leaned against the counter. "My parents want to come visit next month. They want to meet you officially. We talked about this before." Daniel had told his family about me, about the lawsuit and the estrangement, giving them the broad strokes without overwhelming them with details. They'd been supportive from a distance, but I knew meeting them would be different. It would make our relationship real in a way it hadn't been before. "How do you feel about that?" I asked carefully. "I want them to meet you," he said. "But I also don't want you to feel pressured. I know family stuff is complicated for you right now." I thought about it. His parents lived in Oregon, had been married for 30 years, and from everything he'd told me, had a healthy, functional relationship with their kids. Part of me was curious to see what that looked like, to witness a family dynamic that didn't rely on manipulation or guilt. Another part of me was terrified they'd judge me, see me as damaged or difficult, someone not good enough for their son. "Let's do it," I said. "I want to meet them." His face brightened. Yeah, I said. "But you have to promise me something. If it gets weird, if I need to leave or take a break, you won't make it a thing." "Deal," he said immediately. His parents, Christine and Robert, arrived on a Friday evening in mid-September. They were warm and unassuming, the kind of people who hugged you hello even if they just met you. Christine brought homemade cookies, and Robert insisted on grilling dinner despite our protests that he was a guest. Over burgers and corn on the cob, we talked about neutral topics at first. Daniel's childhood, their retirement plans, the differences between Oregon rain and Arizona heat. But eventually, Christine asked the question I'd been expecting. "Daniel mentioned you've been through a difficult time with your family. I hope we're not overstepping, but we want you to know we're here to support you both." I glanced at Daniel, who gave me an encouraging nod. "It has been difficult," I said. "My parents and I had a falling out over financial expectations, and we haven't spoken in over a year. It's been painful but also necessary." Christine reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Family relationships can be so complicated," she said. "I'm sorry you've had to go through that. But I can see how much you care about Daniel, and that's what matters to us." Robert nodded. "We raised our kids to be independent, to make their own choices. Daniel chose you, and that tells us everything we need to know." Their acceptance was so immediate, so uncomplicated, that I felt something loosen in my chest. I'd been bracing for judgment, for questions about why I couldn't just reconcile or whether I'd tried hard enough. But they didn't ask any of that. They just accepted me as I was. That weekend, watching Daniel interact with his parents, I saw what a healthy family looked like. They disagreed sometimes, Robert and Daniel getting into a friendly debate about politics over breakfast. But they did it with respect, listening to each other's points without making it personal. Christine asked Daniel about work and actually listened to his answer, asking follow-up questions that showed she cared. And when they said goodbye Sunday afternoon, they hugged me like I was already part of the family. After they left, I turned to Daniel. "Your parents are amazing." He grinned. "I know. I'm pretty lucky." "Do you think I started then stopped?" "Do I think what? Do you think we can have that?" I asked. "That kind of relationship where we actually like each other in 30 years, where we don't keep score or use love as a weapon." He pulled me close. "I think we already do," he said. "We're just at the beginning of it." September blended into October, and life continued its gentle rhythm. I got another promotion at work, this time to senior director, with a salary that felt almost surreal. I'd gone from waiting tables to pay rent to leading a department of 12 people, and the trajectory still amazed me. Vanessa's wedding was scheduled for late October, a small ceremony at a vineyard in Scottsdale followed by a reception under string lights. I helped her with final details, addressing invitations and assembling favors, grateful for the distraction and the chance to focus on someone else's happiness. The night before the wedding, we had the bachelorette party at Vanessa's apartment. It was low-key, just close friends drinking wine and sharing stories. At one point, Vanessa pulled me aside onto her balcony. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Okay," I said, suddenly nervous. "You're one of the strongest people I know," she continued. "When everything happened with your family, I watched you fall apart and then put yourself back together piece by piece. You didn't let it destroy you. You used it to become someone even better." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have," she said firmly. "But I'm glad you didn't have to. You've been my best friend since we were 20, and I can't imagine my life without you in it." I hugged her tightly. "I love you, you know that?" "I know," she said. "And I love you too." The wedding was beautiful, simple, and heartfelt. Vanessa glowed in a dress that was perfectly her, elegant but not fussy. Her fiancé cried during his vows, and I cried watching them, overwhelmed by the evidence that love could be this uncomplicated and joyful and real. During the reception, Daniel found me at our table. "Dance with me," he said, offering his hand. We swayed to a slow song, and he leaned down to whisper in my ear, "Someday if you want, this could be us." I pulled back to look at him. "Are you proposing?" "Not yet," he said, smiling. "But I'm thinking about it." "Good," I said. "I'm thinking about it too." November brought cooler weather, and the holidays looming on the horizon. I'd been dreading them, knowing this would be my second Thanksgiving and Christmas without my family. Last year I'd spent them with my grandparents, grateful for their presence but acutely aware of who was missing. This year felt different though. Daniel's parents invited us to Oregon for Thanksgiving, and my grandparents suggested we all spend Christmas together at their house, including Daniel. We chose Oregon for Thanksgiving, flying up on Wednesday and returning Sunday. Christine had gone all out, cooking a feast that could have fed 20 people even though there were only 6 of us, Daniel's younger sister Amanda joining us with her girlfriend. The weekend was full of laughter and board games, and walks through rainy streets that smelled like pine and earth. On Thanksgiving Day, as we sat around the table, Robert asked everyone to share what they were grateful for. When it was my turn, I looked around at these people who'd welcomed me without hesitation. "I'm grateful for second chances," I said. "For the opportunity to build a family that chooses me, and for the courage to walk away from situations that weren't healthy. For Daniel, who sees me and loves me anyway. And for all of you for making space for me in your lives." Christine's eyes filled with tears. "We're grateful for you too," she said. Flying back to Phoenix, I felt something I hadn't felt during the holidays in years. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of genuine joy. Christmas with my grandparents was equally special. We decorated their house together, Daniel surprisingly enthusiastic about untangling lights and hanging ornaments. My grandmother made her famous tamales, and we spent Christmas Eve playing cards and watching old movies. On Christmas morning, my grandfather handed me an envelope. "This isn't much," he said, "but we wanted you to have it." Inside was a handwritten letter, pages long detailing memories of me as a child. Times I'd helped my grandmother in the garden, conversations we'd had, moments they'd witnessed that showed who I was becoming. At the end, my grandmother had written, "You have always been enough, exactly as you are. We are so proud of the woman you've become, and we love you more than words can say." I cried reading it, these words I'd been waiting my whole life to hear. Finally given freely and without conditions. Thank you, I said, hugging them both. This means everything. You mean everything, my grandfather said. Don't ever forget that. The new year arrived with possibility. Daniel and I hosted a small party at our house, just close friends counting down to midnight with champagne and noisemakers. When the clock struck 12, he kissed me and said, "This is our year." "I hope you're right," I said. "I am," he insisted. "You'll see." In January, something unexpected happened. I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, postmarked from Mesa. I recognized Natalie's handwriting immediately. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside were 3 pages, front and back, her writing small and cramped like she'd been trying to fit in everything she needed to say. "Olivia," it began. "I don't know if you'll read this or if you'll throw it away immediately. I wouldn't blame you if you did. But I need to try to explain even if you never respond. I've been in therapy for almost a year now, working through a lot of things I should have dealt with decades ago. My therapist helped me see patterns I couldn't see on my own, ways I've let other people's expectations shape my choices, ways I've avoided taking responsibility for my own life. The lawsuit was wrong. Asking you to pay for my house was wrong. But more than that, the years of letting mom and dad treat you like you were less than me, like your accomplishments didn't matter because they didn't fit their vision, that was wrong too. And I participated in it. I let them put me on a pedestal and I let you stay in the shadows because it was easier than challenging them. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't think I deserve it. But I am trying to be better. For my kids and for myself. I'm trying to teach Tyler and Chloe that love doesn't come with conditions. That family means showing up for each other without keeping score. I hope someday they'll have the courage you had, to set boundaries and walk away from things that hurt them, even when it's hard. Tyler asks about you a lot. He misses you. So does Chloe, even though she was so young when everything fell apart. If you're ever willing to see them again, we'd love that. But I understand if you're not. You've built a beautiful life, and I'm genuinely happy for you. You deserve all the good things coming your way. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you know that. Natalie. I read the letter 3 times, then set it down and stared out the window for a long time. Daniel found me there an hour later. "What's wrong?" he asked. I handed him the letter. He read it silently, then looked at me. "How do you feel?" "I don't know," I said honestly. Part of me appreciates the apology. Part of me thinks it's too little, too late. "What do you want to do?" I think I said slowly, "I want to keep the door open with Tyler and Chloe. I want them to know I'm here if they need me. But Natalie and I were never going to be close again. Too much has happened." "That's fair," he said. "You don't owe her more than you're willing to give." I wrote back a week later. A short note thanking her for the apology and saying I'd be open to seeing the kids regularly if she was comfortable with that. I didn't address the rest of it, didn't rehash the past or offer forgiveness I wasn't ready to give. But I left the door open, just a crack, for the possibility that someday things might be different. February brought a surprise I hadn't anticipated. Daniel proposed. We'd been hiking in Sedona, one of our favorite weekend escapes, when he stopped at a scenic overlook and got down on one knee. "Olivia Bennett," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "You are the bravest, kindest, most incredible person I've ever met. You've taught me what it means to choose yourself, to set boundaries, to love without losing yourself in the process. I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you every single day. Will you marry me?" I was crying before he finished, nodding through tears. "Yes," I said. "Yes, absolutely yes." The ring was simple and perfect. A small diamond on a silver band that caught the light as he slipped it onto my finger. We sat on that overlook for an hour talking about the future, about what kind of wedding we wanted, where we might go for a honeymoon, what our life together might look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20. I'd never felt more certain of anything. We set a date for October, giving us 8 months to plan. Vanessa immediately volunteered to help, declaring herself the unofficial wedding coordinator. My grandparents were thrilled, my grandmother already planning what she'd wear and insisting she'd make the wedding cake herself. The only shadow over the engagement was the question of whether to invite my parents. I agonized over it for weeks, discussing it with Dr. Patel in therapy, weighing the pros and cons with Daniel. Part of me wanted them there, wanted to prove I'd built something beautiful without them. Another part of me knew their presence would taint the day, would turn it into a referendum on our relationship, instead of a celebration of my future. In the end, I decided not to invite them. It wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about protecting my peace, about refusing to let their potential drama overshadow what should be the happiest day of my life. I sent invitations to Tyler and Chloe, letting Natalie know they were welcome to attend as their guardian but making it clear the invitation was for the kids, not for reconciliation. Spring passed in a blur of wedding planning and work projects and quiet evenings at home. Daniel and I took a pottery class together, both of us terrible at it but laughing through every misshapen bowl. We planted a garden in our backyard, vegetables and herbs and flowers that would bloom right around the wedding. We hosted dinners for friends, game nights that went too late, lazy Sunday mornings where we didn't get out of bed until noon. Life felt full in the best way, not frantic or overwhelming, just rich with small moments that added up to something meaningful. In June, I got a call from my grandmother. She sounded upset, and my first thought was that something had happened to my grandfather. "Grandma, what's wrong?" I asked. "I'm fine," she said. "Grandpa's fine. But I need to tell you something. Your mother came by yesterday." My stomach dropped. "What did she want?" "She wanted to know if you were getting married. Apparently someone saw your engagement announcement on social media and mentioned it to her." I closed my eyes. "What did you tell her?" "I told her it was true that you're getting married in October." She asked if she was invited. "I told her you'd made your decision about the guest list and I wasn't going to interfere." There was a pause. "She didn't take it well, Olivia. She cried, said terrible things about you, accused us of turning you against her. Your father was there too." He didn't say much, but his silence felt just as bad. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," I said. "Don't be," she said firmly. "We made our choice. We're standing with you. But I wanted you to know in case they try to reach out." They didn't reach out directly, but I started getting messages from extended family members I'd blocked ages ago, somehow finding new ways to contact me. My cousin Brittany sent an Instagram DM asking if I was really not inviting my own mother to my wedding. Uncle Greg left a voicemail saying I was being vindictive and cruel. Aunt Denise sent a long email about forgiveness and family loyalty that I deleted without reading. Each message was a small cut, a reminder that some people would never understand, would never stop seeing me as the villain. But I'd learned to let those opinions roll off me. I knew my truth. That was enough. The wedding day arrived on a perfect October afternoon, the temperature finally dropping below 90, the sky a brilliant cloudless blue. We'd chosen a small venue in Scottsdale, an outdoor garden with desert landscaping and mountain views. There were only 50 guests, the people who mattered most, who'd stood by us through everything. I got ready in a suite at the venue with Vanessa and my grandmother, the three of us drinking mimosas and laughing at nothing in particular. When I put on my dress, a simple ivory gown with lace sleeves, my grandmother's eyes filled with tears. "You're beautiful," she said. "Inside and out." Walking down the aisle on my grandfather's arm, I saw Daniel waiting for me, his eyes bright with tears, and I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The ceremony was short and sweet, vows we'd written ourselves, promises to choose each other, to communicate honestly, to build a life based on respect and partnership. When the officiant pronounced us married and Daniel kissed me, I heard cheers from our small crowd, and I felt a joy so pure it almost hurt. The reception was everything I'd hoped for: good food and better company and dancing under string lights as the sun set. Tyler and Chloe were there, dressed up and excited, and watching them dance together made my heart full. Natalie stayed in the background, respecting the boundaries I'd set, but I saw her smile when Daniel and I cut the cake, and I thought maybe eventually we'd find our way to something that resembled peace. My grandparents gave a toast that made everyone cry, talking about resilience and courage and the family we choose. Vanessa's toast was funny and heartfelt, reminding everyone how far I'd come and how proud she was to stand beside me. And when Daniel and I had our first dance, swaying to a song we'd chosen together, he whispered, "I'm so glad I get to do this with you." "Me too," I said. "Me too." As the night wound down and guests started leaving, I stood with Daniel looking out at the desert landscape, the mountains dark against the purple sky. "We did it," I said. "We really did it. This is just the beginning," he said. "The best is still ahead." I believed him. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop, wasn't bracing for the next crisis. I was just here, present and grateful and whole. The $4,000 allowance had cost me my family of origin, But it had led me to this, to Daniel and chosen family and a life built on my own terms. And I wouldn't change a single thing. The honeymoon took us to Costa Rica. 2 weeks of rainforests and beaches and zip-lining through canopies that seemed to touch the sky. We stayed in small eco-lodges, woke up to howler monkeys and went to sleep with the sound of waves crashing against volcanic rock. It was the first time in years I'd completely disconnected from everything. No emails, no social media, no reminders of the life I'd left behind in Phoenix. Just Daniel and me, discovering a country that felt like another world entirely. One afternoon, we were hiking to a waterfall when Daniel stopped suddenly on the trail. "What's wrong?" I asked, worried he'd twisted an ankle or seen a snake. He turned to face me, his expression serious. "I've been thinking about something," he said. "About us, about the future." "Okay," I said cautiously, my heart rate picking up. "I want kids," he said. "I know we've talked about it in general terms, but I need to know if that's something you actually want or if you were just saying what you thought I wanted to hear." I took a deep breath. The truth was, I'd been avoiding thinking too deeply about children. The idea terrified me, not because I didn't want them, but because I was afraid I'd repeat the patterns I'd grown up with. What if I played favorites like my parents had? What if I kept score, made my love conditional, turned into the very thing I'd run from? "I do want kids," I said slowly. "But I'm scared I'll mess them up the way my parents messed me up." Daniel reached for my hands. "You won't," he said. "You know what not to do. You've spent years learning how to love without conditions, how to set healthy boundaries, how to show up for people without losing yourself. You're going to be an amazing mother. How can you be so sure?" "Because I know you," he said simply. "I know your heart. And I know you'll do the work to make sure our kids feel seen and loved and valued. All of them equally." We stood there on that trail in the middle of a Costa Rican rainforest, and I let myself imagine it. A little girl with Daniel's eyes. A boy with my stubborn streak. Teaching them to be kind but firm, generous but boundaried, loving but not at the expense of themselves. Maybe I could do it. Maybe we could do it together. "Let's try," I said. "When we get home, let's start trying." His face lit up in a way that made my chest ache with how much I loved him. Yeah, I said, and kissed him right there on the trail while a family of coatis watched us from the trees above. We flew home at the end of November, tanned and relaxed and ready to start this new chapter. The holidays came quickly, and this year we split our time between both families. Thanksgiving with my grandparents in Tempe and Christmas with Daniel's parents in Oregon. It felt balanced in a way my life never had before, like I'd finally found equilibrium between past and future, between honoring where I came from and building where I was going. In January, I started the new year with a ritual Dr. Patel had suggested. I wrote a letter to my younger self, to the girl who'd felt invisible and unworthy, who'd worked so hard for crumbs of approval that never came. I told her she was enough. I told her the path ahead would be brutal but she'd survive it, that she'd come out stronger and clearer and more herself than she'd ever been. I told her to hold on, that love was coming. Real love that didn't require her to shrink or perform or apologize for existing. Then I burned the letter in our backyard fire pit, watching the smoke carry those words up into the desert sky. A release and a promise all at once. February brought news I'd been half expecting but dreading nonetheless. My grandfather called one morning, his voice heavy. "Olivia, I need to tell you something about your mother." My stomach clenched. "What happened?" "She's been telling people around town that you've been stealing from us, that you manipulated us into changing our will. Some of the folks at church have been giving us the cold shoulder because of it." I felt anger surge through me, hot and immediate. "That's not true. None of that's true. We know that," he said. "And anyone who knows you knows that. But your mother, she's desperate to make herself the victim in all this. She can't accept that she's the one who pushed you away. What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Nothing," he said firmly. "We're handling it. We've told people the truth, and if they choose to believe her lies, that's on them. I just wanted you to know in case it gets back to you somehow." "Thank you for telling me," I said. "I'm sorry you're dealing with this." "Don't be," he said. "We made our choice, and we'd make it again in a heartbeat." After we hung up, I told Daniel what had happened. He was furious on my behalf, ready to drive to Tempe and confront my mother himself. I had to talk him down, remind him that engaging would only make things worse, that my mother wanted a reaction and refusing to give her one was the strongest response we could offer. But it hurt. Even after everything, even knowing who she was and what she was capable of, it hurt that she was actively trying to damage my reputation, to turn people against me. I thought I'd moved past caring what she thought or did, but apparently some wounds never fully healed. They just became scars you learn to live with. In March, we got the news we'd been hoping for. I was pregnant. We found out on a rainy Saturday morning, both of us staring at the test in disbelief before Daniel picked me up and spun me around the bathroom. "We're having a baby," he kept saying. "We're actually having a baby." The first trimester was rough, morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion that made me feel like I was moving through molasses. But beneath the physical misery was a joy so profound it sometimes took my breath away. We were creating a life, a person who would be loved unconditionally from the very first moment. We told our families at 12 weeks. My grandparents cried happy tears, my grandmother immediately starting to knit tiny blankets and booties. Daniel's parents were equally thrilled, already making plans to visit once the baby arrived. We told Vanessa over dinner, and she screamed so loudly the entire restaurant turned to stare. "I'm going to be the best aunt," she declared. "This kid is going to be so spoiled." The only person I didn't tell was my mother. I didn't owe her that information, didn't want her anywhere near this joy. But somehow she found out anyway. In May, when I was starting to show, I got a letter. Not from my mother directly, but from Aunt Denise, writing on her behalf. "Olivia," the letter began, "your mother is heartbroken that she had to hear about your pregnancy through the grapevine instead of from you directly. Despite everything that's happened between you, she's still your mother, and she has a right to know about her grandchild. She's willing to put the past behind your heart to forgive and move forward, especially now that you're about to become a mother yourself. You'll understand soon enough the unconditional love a parent has for their child, and maybe then you'll see things differently." I read the letter once, then tore it into tiny pieces and threw it away. The audacity of it, the presumption that becoming a mother myself would somehow make me forget or forgive what had been done to me. If anything, pregnancy had made me more certain I'd made the right choice. I would never treat my child the way I'd been treated. I would never make them feel like they had to earn my love, or that their worth was tied to how well they fit my expectations. This baby, I thought, placing my hand on my growing belly, would know from day one that they were wanted and cherished and enough, exactly as they were. In June, we found out we were having a girl. Daniel cried when the ultrasound tech told us, and I felt something shift inside me, a fierce protective love for this tiny person I hadn't even met yet. We started talking about names, going through family trees and baby name books, trying out different combinations to see what felt right. We finally settled on Clara Rose, Clara after Daniel's grandmother who'd passed away when he was young, and Rose because I'd always loved the simplicity and strength of it. Summer passed in a blur of doctor's appointments and nursery preparation, and nesting impulses that had me organizing closets at 2 in the morning. Daniel was patient through all of it, assembling furniture and painting walls and making midnight runs for whatever weird food combination I was craving. We took a baby moon to San Diego in July, one last trip before our lives changed forever, walking along the beach and eating fish tacos and imagining what life would be like with Clara in it. In August, Tyler reached out asking if he could visit. He was 11 now, old enough to take the light rail from Mesa to Chandler by himself. We set up a day for him to come over, and I spent the morning anxiously cleaning even though the house was already spotless. When he arrived, he was taller than I remembered, his voice starting to crack in that awkward puberty way. He hugged me carefully, mindful of my pregnant belly, then immediately asked if he could feel the baby kick. "She's sleeping right now," I said, "but maybe later." We spent the afternoon playing video games and talking about school and his soccer team. He told me about a girl he liked, blushing furiously, and asked my advice on how to talk to her. "Just be yourself," I said, "and listen when she talks. Girls like guys who actually pay attention." He nodded seriously, filing away the information. Before he left, he turned to me with a question I'd been expecting but still wasn't fully prepared for. "Do you think you'll ever talk to Mom and Grandma and Grandpa again?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "A lot of hurt happened between us, and I'm not sure it can be fixed. But that doesn't change how I feel about you and Chloe. You're my family and I love you both." He hugged me tight. "I wish things were different," he said quietly. "Me too," I admitted. "But we have to work with what is, not what we wish it could be." September brought the final stretch of pregnancy, the exhaustion and discomfort ramping up as Clara ran out of room to move. I went on maternity leave from work, grateful for the chance to rest and prepare. Daniel's mother flew in to help us get ready, bringing gifts and wisdom and an extra set of hands to finish all the last-minute tasks we'd been putting off. My grandmother visited often too, the two grandmothers bonding over their shared excitement for Clara's arrival. On a warm October evening, 2 weeks before my due date, my water broke. Daniel drove me to the hospital with remarkable calm, considering I could see his hands shaking on the steering wheel. Labor was long and difficult, 20 hours of contractions and breathing exercises and moments where I was certain I couldn't do it. But then, just after sunrise on October 15th, Clara Rose entered the world with a cry that sounded like she was already protesting the injustice of being born. She was perfect, tiny and red-faced and absolutely perfect. They placed her on my chest and I looked down at this person I'd made. This life Daniel and I had created together. And I understood for the first time what unconditional love really meant. It wasn't a feeling. It was a choice I'd make every single day for the rest of my life. The first few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, and the steep learning curve of figuring out what each different cry meant. But there were also moments of startling clarity, holding Clara at 3 in the morning while she nursed, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger, and feeling more present and purposeful than I'd ever felt in my life. My grandparents visited regularly, my grandfather tearing up every time he held her. Daniel's parents came for a week, his mother teaching us everything she'd learned with her own kids while his father kept the house running and made sure we actually ate real meals. Vanessa brought meal trains organized by friends from work and made us laugh when we were too tired to function. The only absence that stung was my mother's. Not because I wanted her there, but because I grieved the grandmother Clara would never have, the relationship that could have existed if my mother had been capable of loving without conditions. But then I'd look at my grandmother with Clara, singing soft Spanish lullabies and rocking her with such tenderness, and I'd remember that family wasn't about blood. It was about showing up. And Clara had plenty of people who were showing up for her. In December, we celebrated Clara's first Christmas, dressing her in a ridiculous reindeer outfit and taking approximately 600 photos. She slept through most of it, oblivious to the chaos of wrapping paper and laughter and the sheer volume of gifts her grandparents had bought her. Looking around at our living room full of people who loved us, who'd stood by us through everything, I felt a contentment so deep it brought tears to my eyes. This was what I'd been working toward all along, even when I didn't know it. Not just surviving but thriving. Not just escaping toxicity but building something beautiful in its place. The $4,000 allowance that had once seemed like a gift, and then a burden, had ultimately been a catalyst, forcing me to choose between the family I was born into and the life I wanted to create. I'd chosen myself, and in doing so I'd found everything I'd been looking for. Love without conditions. Boundaries without guilt. A family that chose me as fiercely as I chose them. And now, holding my daughter while surrounded by the people who mattered most, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice. Every painful step had led me here, to this moment, to this life. And I wouldn't change a single thing. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.